When the phrase biblical worldview is mentioned, when that phrase is used, I've noticed that many people, maybe most folks actually, including a great number of the Christians that I speak to, most folks seem to assume that that just means that the Bible has a list of what is right and what is wrong. A biblical worldview is just this idea of here's what's morally acceptable and here's what's morally unacceptable. But a biblical worldview is just like any other worldview. It's providing the lens through which we view the entire world, not just what's right and what's wrong, what should be allowed and what shouldn't be allowed. A biblical worldview is a complete and comprehensive worldview, and it sets the framework, gives us information, describes existence and ourselves in such a way that we can make decisions of every kind. In fact, a biblical worldview is designed to provide us direction, to provide Christians and believers direction, literally in every aspect of our life. So if you talk to any number of different groups of folks, philosophers, political scientists, theologians, economists, preachers, and others, they'll have a general definition of a worldview that has tremendous overlap, and each may see a different piece more important than the other, the philosophers versus the theologians, or the political scientists versus the economists. But there's a generally understood description of a worldview, and it's this high-level understanding. So, for example, worldviews, they say, generally are trying to answer questions such as, what is the ultimate origin of everything? Is there a purpose to, or what is the purpose of what exists? Is there a God? If so, what is the nature of God if he exists? What is the nature of human beings? How do they act? Why do they behave in the way that they do? Can we determine what is morally right and wrong? How do we determine what is morally right and wrong? Can we determine what is true and what is false? Radically different question than morally right and wrong. Can we determine objectively what is true and what is false, what is truth and what is error, and what is the framework that we can use to accumulate knowledge? So as we begin to understand the ultimate origin of everything, and we begin to understand the core tenets of human nature, and we begin to believe that a God does or doesn't exist, and we think we know from the facts that we understand what is true and what is false, how do we then accumulate and add to those facts, separating additional truth from false over time? Those are general questions, but again, across most disciplines, those are the questions that folks are looking for a worldview to answer, because if we know who we are, why we are, what we're supposed to be doing, if we know right from wrong, if we can figure out what's correct and what's incorrect, what's truth and what's false, what works and what's an error, and we can figure out how to build on any and all of that knowledge over time, then we've clearly, again, got a lens. Instead of looking at the world and going, I have no idea. Is that apple, when it falls from the tree, is it going to drop to the ground? Is it going to float right where it's at? Or is it going to shoot off up into space? Well, our worldview says no. We always know it will fall to the ground because of gravity. We've established that as a truth, etc. So worldviews are a lens we see everything through. And the Bible provides one of those lenses. The Bible provides, I would argue, the most comprehensive and clearly the most accurate and actionable worldview that there is. The Bible addresses every question that we just asked, every question that all those disciplines say are necessary to be answered to have a comprehensive worldview. The Bible addresses all of those questions and more, and with just these rich, meaningful, powerful answers, and has done so down through history. And so again, holding a biblical worldview, it does give us an idea of what God says is morally right and morally wrong. You think about the 10 Commandments with greater detail added to them. And yes, the Bible says it is wrong to steal from others or to lie to others for your own benefit, or to harm them or to kill them for your own benefit. So the Bible, holding a biblical worldview, absolutely guides us morally into what is right and wrong. but it also helps us build strong marriages and other strong relationships. It teaches us how to raise our children. It even helps us decide which public policies we should choose as voters in a democracy, even though specific policies about specific things may not have been addressed in the Bible, because the Bible says this is what's important, this is how human nature is best defined, this is what the role of government is, etc. We can take a document that's thousands of years old and directly apply it to making choices in our political system today. And it helps us understand what ideologies, what political philosophies are going to be true or going to be false. For example, I think it's largely agreed now by most historians, political scientists, psychologists, etc., that communism and Freudian psychoanalysis, to name two, it's largely generally agreed that those two were failures. They're historical failures. What's not always understood is that from the beginning of those ideologies, from the beginning of those philosophies, Christians predicted that they would fail, because the assumptions that communism, Freudian psychoanalysis make about human nature, they rub against the grain of a biblical worldview. They stand in opposition to how the Bible says the world works. And so Christians were able to clearly and quickly, hundreds of years before they were discredited by the rest of humanity, Christians were able to say, those things aren't going to work, and here's why those things aren't going to work. So in some upcoming podcasts, I'll provide a high-level summary of just what a biblical worldview is. How does the Bible answer those questions that we just talked about earlier? We'll talk about how did Christians know that communism was destined to fail, etc. And we'll look at some other ways in our modern culture that a biblical worldview guides us. For now, I just wanted to say that a biblical worldview is not just a set of moral beliefs, moral understandings, or moral laws. A biblical worldview is the comprehensive structure that believers use to help us understand how the world works, how and why humans do what we do, and how we should leverage that information. It helps us understand our place in the universe, our purpose in the universe. And it shows us how we are to accumulate knowledge, how we are to determine right from wrong, not just the moral right from wrong that God gives us, but how we're to determine falsehood from truth, accuracy from error, and how we're to accumulate knowledge on top of that so that we can continue to grow and expand in our role as God's stewards on His earth. So we'll leave this podcast at just a summary that a biblical worldview is not just a set of moral laws. It's not just a set of right and wrongs. It is a comprehensive structure. We'll leave that structure and then how we apply that structure to our modern life to future podcasts. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time, this is Andy.